Well, now that Britain is leaving the EU, what's going to happen next? How is the Bank of England positioning itself in the transition of the economy? How are the markets going to look at the UK going forward? Well, to share his thoughts with us is Maudi Lentsoane, who's the Managing Director of Lehumo Investments. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Peter.
All right, so based on what's played out so far, we've had a very painful 3 years watching this. Are we in? Are we out? They are now out this evening at 1 o'clock our time on Saturday. Our markets, are they even reacting? Is this an event?
Yeah, look, we haven't seen much reaction, Peter. Theoretically, they're out, Peter, but in practice, Britain, it's still part of the EU. I mean, pretty much for the next, in this transition period, what they call it, for the next 11 months, they still abide by the EU rules. Everything remains the same from a regulation perspective. Nothing changes. However, they're in this transition period where hopefully at the end of this transition period, which is 11 months, at the end of 2020, they would have reached an agreement with the EU exit plan, and then we can then talk about Britain being out of the EU. But as things stand, they are pretty much still in it. And of course, we are going to be watching the whole year those negotiations, which way they're going to go, until such time that we get to the end.
All right, and I would imagine, there's going to be shifts. Head offices moving out of the UK, going on to mainland Europe, and some of those are investors in South Africa. Yep. So, by and large, we might be just dealing with Europe anyway.
No, absolutely. We certainly very much directly impacted by everything that is going to be unfolding there. Europe, one of our biggest trading partner, certainly the changes that are going to unfold there are going to affect South Africa. And many other countries, of course, that are directly dealing with the UK, which is why the developments, they are certainly going to have an impact on us. If they go smoothly, I think it will be something that, of course, has a positive impact. But I think if we then begin to have the dramas that we saw, which I think it's highly likely, because it's not an easy thing. It's not easy. It's never happened before, and we are in uncharted territories, basically.
All right, so it's unlikely that this deal can happen in 11 months. Boris Johnson seems to think so, but a lot of people who have been watching this can't see it happening, especially if we consider it's taken 3 years to just leave without anything in hand.
Yep.
So 11 months, what can happen?
Yeah, 11 months is going to be it's going to be a big ask. No doubt the two parties it's in their best interest to find a deal. We've had 3.5 years of almost going nowhere, and a lot of uncertainty, a lot of investment that were supposed to go into the UK has pulled back until such time that there is a deal. So the UK does need to conclude this. Boris Johnson seems to be, I think his back is much bigger than his butt. He's very adamant that he's not going to prolong it past 11 months. So does that mean that he's going to agree to what the EU is demanding? So there's a lot of debates and a lot of question marks around it, but it's going to be a very tough one. Remember, there's other members that are remaining, and the EU wants to remain intact. If they give them a sweet deal and sweet divorce, what does it mean for other members?
All right, so we've seen a commemorative 50 pence coin being issued. Yep. Britain never really joined the European monetary community, and I just wonder if the pound is going to be affected by this Brexit movement.
Look, the pound so far seems to be pricing in, I think, a smooth process. You can see in terms of the movements that we've seen, we're now back above the 130 level, and we seem to be stabilizing around that sort of level. But I think if we then get to the tension points where even walking away without a deal is something that they will push for, because if he says he's not going to push beyond 11 months, what does it mean? What happens after 11 months when there's no deal? Do they walk away? So there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think you're going to see that reflected in the pound for the rest of the year, until such time that we've got a clarity about what deal and what sort of when is it going to happen.
Bank of England, what do? They're watching this. They've got manage the economy in their country.
Yeah.
What would be the governor thinking?
He delivered his last meeting yesterday. So for him, he's walked away from the problem and let the next man who comes through or a woman who comes through deal with it. So they acknowledged the fact that there is some positive signs that the UK experienced, but that I think is in line with the entire globe. We've seen quite a nice recovery globally, led by the US. But there's still a lot of uncertainty, Peter. If you look into the 2020, the trade tension between the US and China, now the coronavirus hopefully doesn't really escalate into that much of a pandemic problem. So I think there's a lot of things that could still go wrong for the globe, and that would, in retrospect, have an impact on the British economy as well.
All right, so we've got a lot of exporters from South Africa into Europe and into the UK. They keep talking about this frictionless trade that's been able to be enjoyed. You land in Holland and you can disperse your goods in any part of the EU, and that's going to change now once you've got a portion that needs to go to the UK. Might that then put us in a situation where you say, I'd rather land in Europe and go to 26, 27 countries than have to try and do separate motions into the UK?
Yeah, look, you see, it's as I said, it's going to impact how the trade relations between South Africa and the EU looks like. Do you go directly into the UK? Do you go via EU? And also remember, there's now the conversation between the US and the EU. So I think we're looking at the world that is going to completely look way different from what it is now. EU is mindful that when they're negotiating with Britain, they also have to be mindful of what Donald Trump is looking for and what the trade tension between them, how the trade is going to look like there. So there's a whole lot of trade conversation across the globe. We are in a transitional period. It's very uncertain about how it's going to look like. Even the phase 2 of the US, between the US and China, we don't know what's going to look like. So there's this uncertainty that unfortunately is impacting negatively. Investments is not able to progress forward as a result of this uncertainty.
All right, so if I've got shares in the JSE, I can sleep soundly tonight because chances are nothing's going to happen.
Nothing much is going to happen.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thanks so much, Maudi. Always a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your insights.
Having me.